In the quiet of a London evening, as the fog rolls in from the Thames, history isn't written with the clash of steel or the roar of cannons. It's written in ink, on parchment, under the soft, flickering glow of candlelight. The world, you see, was never truly conquered by armies alone. It was conquered by paperwork, by letters sent across vast oceans, by shipping logs meticulously kept, by quiet whispers in dimly lit offices. This is the story of how an empire wasn't just built on naval might, but on the silent, relentless power of administration. Imagine, for a moment, the year is 1720. The streets of London are a maze of cobblestone, shrouded in a persistent mist. But inside, in countless counting houses and government offices, a revolution is underway. It's a revolution of organization. While other empires flaunted their legions and their gold, Britain was quietly building something far more enduring. The most sophisticated administrative system the world had ever seen. It was a complex machine of clerks, scribes, and officials, all working in concert, connected by a river of paper that flowed across the globe. This wasn't about grand battles. It was about the mundane, yet monumental, task of governing from a distance. It was the art of control through correspondence, the science of rule by At the heart of this paper empire was a peculiar and powerful entity, the Honorable East India Company. It began as a humble trading venture, a charter granted by a queen to a handful of merchants seeking the spices and silks of the East. But it grew into something else entirely. It became a state within a state, a corporate titan with its own army, its own navy, and its own vast bureaucracy. From its headquarters on Leadenhall Street, the company's directors oversaw a dominion thousands of miles away, not through direct sight, but through the detailed reports and ledgers that arrived on ships after months at sea. Every ship that left the docks was a vessel of information. Its manifest was a poem of commerce, chests of tea, bolts of cotton, barrels of indigo. The shipping logs were more than just navigational records. They were the arteries of the empire, charting the flow of wealth and goods. Each entry, each signature, was a thread in an immense tapestry of global trade, woven together in the quiet offices back in London. Clerks, their fingers stained with ink, would spend their days transcribing these details, calculating profits, and assessing risks. Their world was not one of adventure on the high seas, but of columns and figures, of balancing accounts that spanned continents. Yet, their work was just as crucial as that of any ship's captain. They were the silent architects of a global economic system. As goods arrived, they passed through the stoic, imposing customs houses that lined the riverbanks. Here, another army of officials stood ready. They were the gatekeepers of the nation's wealth. With meticulous care, they inspected cargo, levied duties, and recorded every item that entered the kingdom. These customs records became a treasure trove of data, allowing the government to understand the health of its trade, the tastes of its people, and the sources of its revenue. It was an early form of big data, collected not by computers, but by men with quills and an unwavering attention to detail. This information was power. It allowed the state to fine-tune its economic policies, to encourage certain trades and discourage others, and to fund the naval fleet that protected its interests across the world. This sprawling network of administration gave birth to what we now recognize as the modern civil service, a professional class of public servants, selected not by birthright, but increasingly by merit. These were the men who ran the day-to-day business of the empire. They drafted legislation, managed the colonies, and ensured the smooth functioning of the government. Their work was often anonymous, their names lost to history, but their collective effort created a system of governance that was stable, predictable, and incredibly effective. It was a bureaucracy that could outlive monarchs and survive political turmoil. A machine that, once set in motion, was difficult to stop. They created a culture of procedure, of following the rules, of documenting everything. It might seem dull, but this very dullness was its strength. It created order out of the chaos of a rapidly expanding world. So now, let your mind drift back. Back to that quiet, candlelit room. The only sounds are the gentle scratch of a quill on paper, the soft rustle of a turning page, the distant chime of a clock marking the late hour. The air is still, thick with the smell of old books, beeswax, and drying ink. Outside, the city sleeps under a blanket of fog, but in here, an empire is being managed. A world is being ordered. This is a different kind of power. Not the loud, bombastic power of a conquering general, but the quiet, persistent power of the administrator. The power of a signature on a document, a seal on a letter, an entry in a ledger. Feel the calm of this ordered world, the gentle, slow rhythm of its work. Each stroke of the pen is deliberate, each calculation precise. There is a peacefulness in this predictability, a soothing quality to the methodical nature of the task. It's a world away from the frantic pace of our own time. Here, time moves differently. It's measured not in seconds, but in the slow burn of a candle, the gradual accumulation of pages in a book. It's a world built on patience and perseverance. Think of the journey of a single letter, written in a London office, sealed with wax, and carried by coach to a waiting ship. It then spends months at sea, surviving storms and the vast emptiness of the ocean, before finally arriving in a distant port in India or the Americas. There, it's read by another official in another quiet office, who then pens a reply that will begin the long journey back. These constant Slamovian conversation, this dialogue of paper and ink, is what held the empire together. It was a bond of trust, a chain of command that stretched across the globe, all maintained through the simple act of writing. Let the gentle imagery soothe your mind, the deep, warm glow of the candles, casting long, soft shadows across the room. The rich, dark wood of the desks and bookshelves, the slow, cinematic sweep of the camera, lingering on the details. An ink, a stack of sealed letters, the intricate patterns of a world map hanging on the wall. There are no sudden movements, no lewd noises, just a deep, abiding sense of peace and tranquility. A sense of history unfolding not in a rush, but as a slow, steady, and inevitable tide. This is the untold story of empire, the story of the clerks, the accountants, the log keepers, and the civil servants. The forgotten figures who, through their patient and diligent work, built a system that would shape the modern world. Their legacy is not in grand monuments of stone, but in the very structures of our own societies, in our legal systems, our government departments, our global corporations. It's a legacy written in the fine print of history, a story of quiet, administrative might. So relax, breathe deeply, and let this peaceful, forgotten world carry you into a state of deep calm and restful curiosity. The scratching of the quill fades, the candle burns low, and the quiet work of the empire continues softly into the night. Thank you for joining this journey into the past. If you found this story relaxing and interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more peaceful explorations of history. Your support helps us create more content like this. Until next time, sleep well. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a force, unseen yet all-powerful, that can move mountains, carve out coastlines, and redraw the very maps of our world. This isn't a force of nature, not in the way we usually think of it. It's a human force, an invisible empire of paper and ink, of rules and regulations that once stretched across the globe, shaping the destinies of continents and the lives of millions. This is the story of that power, the quiet, meticulous administration that built and maintained the largest empire in history. Tonight, we're not focusing on the sound of cannons or the clash of swords. Instead, we'll listen to the gentle rustle of parchment, the scratch of a quill pen on a heavy ledger, the quiet murmur of clerks in a distant, candlelit office. This is the story of the British Empire, told not through its battles, but through its bureaucracy. A power built on numbers, on shipping manifests, on tax records, and on the steady, unending flow of information across vast and treacherous oceans. Let's journey back in time to the heart of this empire, London. Picture a grand imposing building on a foggy day. This is the Colonial office. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of old paper, leather-bound books, and sealing wax. Men in starched collars and dark suits move with a quiet purpose. They are the architects of this global enterprise, yet they may never set foot on the lands they govern. Their world is one of maps, charts, and detailed reports sent from thousands of miles away. From these quiet rooms, directives flow outward, carried on the tides. Imagine a ship, its sails full, cutting through the waves of the Atlantic. In its hold, alongside trade goods and supplies, is a locked chest, Inside are official dispatches, letters of appointment for a new governor, updated tax laws for a colony in the Americas, or instructions for building a new harbor in the Caribbean. Each piece of paper is a thread in an immense web, connecting the center of power to its most distant outposts. Now, let's follow one of these threads across the ocean. We arrive in a bustling port, perhaps in Virginia or The air is alive with the shouts of sailors, the creak of wooden cranes, and the clatter of horse-drawn carts on cobblestone streets. Here, at the docks, another set of administrators takes over. These are the customs officials, the harbor masters, the tax collectors. They are the gatekeepers. Watch as a ship from Bristol is unloaded. Bales of cotton, barrels of sugar, crates of tobacco. Every item is meticulously recorded. A clerk with an ink-stained finger runs his hand down a long list on a clipboard. His job is to calculate the duties owed to the crown. It's a tedious task, but it's the very lifeblood of the empire. This revenue, collected penny by penny, pound by pound, from countless boats like this one, funds the navy that protects these sea lanes, pays the salaries of governors, and builds the infrastructure that keeps the whole system running. The process seems so ordinary, so mundane. A man counting barrels on a dock, another man writing figures in a ledger, but together, they are part of a colossal machine. This system determined what a farmer in North Carolina could grow, what a merchant in Boston could sell, and how much a craftsman in Philadelphia had to pay for his tools. It shaped the economic landscape of the American colonies, encouraging certain industries while restricting others, all to benefit the mother country. Let's step away from the busy port and into the office of a colonial governor. This man is the king's representative, the embodiment of British authority. His residence is often the grandest in the colony, a symbol of power and stability. Inside, he presides over a council, deliberating on local laws, land grants, and disputes. He is a diplomat, a military commander, and a chief administrator all rolled into one. He communicates constantly with London, sending detailed reports on the colony's economy, its security, and the mood of its people. His letters, written by candlelight late into the night, are vital intelligence, helping the distant masters in the colonial office make their decisions. But the governor doesn't act alone. He relies on a small army of clerks, secretaries, and assistants. These are the unsung heroes, or perhaps the unsung gears, of the imperial machine. They are the ones who draft the documents, copy the letters, file the reports, and keep the records. Their handwriting fills thousands of volumes that now rest in archives, a silent testament to their tireless work. Imagine a young clerk, newly arrived from England, hunched over a desk. He's thousands of miles from home, in a land that feels strange and new. His world is one of inkwells, blotting paper, and endless columns of figures. He might be recording land sales, issuing licenses, or tracking military payrolls. He may not grasp the full scale of the enterprise he's part of, but his precision and diligence are essential. Without him, and thousands like him, the empire would grind to a halt. This network of administration created a surprising uniformity across a vast and diverse empire. A legal document drawn up in a dusty office in Savannah would use the same language and format as one created in London. A merchant in Jamaica would have to navigate a similar set of customs regulations as a merchant in New York. This standardization was a key source of the empire's strength. It made the vast, sprawling territories manageable, governable from a single point. It created a predictable environment for trade and investment, which in turn generated the wealth that sustained the empire. Think about the sheer scale of the information being managed. Population counts, agricultural output, trade volumes, military readiness, tax receipts. All of this data had to be collected, compiled, and transmitted across oceans. It was the big data of its day, and it was all processed by hand. The handwritten ledgers and correspondence were the servers and fiber optic cables of the 18th century. This constant flow of information allowed the government in London to have a remarkably detailed, if sometimes outdated, picture of its overseas possessions. It allowed them to respond to crises, plan for the future, and tighten their control when necessary. This invisible structure of rules and records had a profound impact on the landscape itself. When the crown granted a huge tract of land to a proprietor, the boundaries were drawn on a map in an office. Those lines, imaginary at first, would soon become very real, marked by fences, stone walls, and roads. The establishment of a new administrative district would lead to the growth of a new town, with a courthouse, a jail, and a tax office at its center. The decision to levy a new tax on a specific product could change farming patterns across an entire region. The paper empire left a physical imprint on the American continent, an imprint that is still visible today in the layout of our cities and the lines of our state borders. But as the 18th century wore on, the very efficiency of this system began to create tension. The American colonists, who had grown up within this framework, were becoming more prosperous, more confident, and more aware of their own distinct identity. They were used to a degree of self-governance, but they were also constantly reminded of their subordinate position. The ever-present hand of the imperial administration, the taxes, the trade restrictions, the royal governors, began to feel less like a source of stability and more like a source of irritation, a check on their freedom and their ambition. The same pieces of paper that held the empire together would eventually provide the sparks for its partial unraveling. A new tax law, passed in Parliament and sent across the ocean, was not just a line item in a budget. It was a statement of power. And for a growing number of Americans, it was an unacceptable one. The meticulous records of the tax collectors became a focus of popular anger. The grand offices of the customs officials became targets for protest. The invisible empire was suddenly becoming very visible, and many did not like what they saw. As we drift off to sleep tonight, let's hold on to this quiet image. The image of an empire built not just with ships and soldiers, but with paper and ink. An empire run by clerks and accountants, whose greatest weapons were the ledger and the pen. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful forces in history are not the loudest, but the most organized, the most persistent, the most meticulous. It was a system of control, subtle yet pervasive, that shaped a continent and set the stage for a revolution. The quiet work of these countless administrators in their distant offices had consequences that would echo for centuries and would ultimately help give birth to a new nation. Sleep well. Well, enough is past, when the world moved at the pace of a horse's gallop or the unfurling of a ship's sail. Empires were held together not by steel and wire, but by ink and parchment. Imagine, for a moment, the weight of a single letter, a scroll of paper that could take months, even half a year, to cross vast oceans and rugged continents. This wasn't just a message, it was the lifeblood of an empire, a fragile thread of command stretching across the known world. Think of a king, his brow furrowed in the dim candlelight of his study, dipping a quill into a well of dark ink. The scratch of the nib on the paper is the only sound, a delicate whisper that will soon become a roar of destiny. Every word is chosen with immense care, for once the wax is sealed with the royal signet, there is no taking it back. This letter might declare war, or it might offer peace. It could grant a pardon to a condemned man, or order the construction of a great monument. It might carry news of a royal birth, securing a dynasty, or it might convey the final, solemn words of a dying monarch. Once written, this fragile document begins its epic journey. It is entrusted to a royal messenger, a man whose life is sworn to the protection of his cargo. He will ride through sun-scorched deserts and frozen mountain passes, his horse's breath misting in the cold air. He'll board a creaking wooden ship, its sails billowing against a sapphire sky, and endure the lonely, endless expanse of the sea. Storms will lash the deck, pirates may loom on the horizon, but his only duty is to the letter tucked safely within his oilskin pouch. The fate of thousands, the future of a kingdom, rests on his solitary courage. And at the other end of this journey, months later, a colonial governor stands on a distant shore, gazing out at the horizon. He has been governing a territory the size of a country with no new instructions for 6, maybe 8 months. He has had to make decisions on his own, relying on his judgment and the last set of orders he received, now hopelessly out of date. He has faced local uprisings, negotiated with unfamiliar tribes, and managed trade, all while living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the king's word. The arrival of a ship is an event of seismic importance. When the messenger finally steps onto the dock, weary and weathered, the entire settlement holds its breath. The seal is broken, the letter unrolled. The words written by candlelight so long ago and so far away are now read aloud. And in that moment, the world shifts. An anxious quiet is replaced by a flurry of activity, or perhaps a somber resignation. The past has finally caught up with the present. Let's sink deeper into this world of deliberate, patient communication. The entire system was a marvel of trust and anticipation. In the heart of the empire, scribes would work in quiet scriptoriums, their days filled with the endless task of copying decrees, ledgers, and official correspondence. Imagine rooms lined with shelves, each holding countless scrolls. A library of imperial will. The air would be thick with the scent of aging paper, ink, and melting wax. These were the nerve centers, the memory banks of the entire administration. Every letter sent out was a gamble. By the time it reached its destination, the political landscape could have completely transformed. The king who sent the order might no longer be on the throne. The war it declared might have already been lost, or its reasons rendered obsolete. The general receiving commands to attack might find that the enemy has already moved on, or that a fragile peace has been brokered in his absence. It was a constant conversation with the past. Colonial leaders were masters of interpretation and improvisation. They had to read between the lines of year-old letters, trying to divine the king's intent and apply it to a reality he could impossibly have imagined. They were like actors in a play, given only the first act and left to write the rest themselves, hoping it would align with the playwright's grand vision when the final script eventually arrived. The flow of information was not just slow, it was a one-way street for long periods. A governor in a faraway land might send a desperate plea for more soldiers or supplies. He would then have to wait a full year, sometimes longer, for a response. In that time, his outpost could be overrun, his people could starve, or he might have, through sheer ingenuity, solved the crisis on his own. When the reply finally came, it might be a celebration of his success or a posthumous commendation for his bravery. This system fostered a unique kind of leader, resourceful, independent, and incredibly patient. They were viceroys, proconsuls, and governors who ruled like kings in their own right, always with the knowledge that their authority was borrowed and their actions would eventually be judged by a distant master. The letters they received were their only connection to that power, a tangible link to the source of their legitimacy. They would read and reread these precious documents, seeking guidance, reassurance, and authority in the carefully penned script. The paper itself, bearing the royal seal, was a symbol of power, treated with a reverence we can hardly imagine today. Now, let's drift across the oceans on one of these majestic, slow-moving vessels. Picture yourself on the deck of a galleon, the sun warm on your face and the gentle rocking of the waves a constant, soothing rhythm. The only sounds are the creak of the ship's timbers, the snap of the sails in the wind, and the cry of gulls overhead. Below deck, in a locked captain's chest, lies the mail pouch. It carries not just official decrees, but personal letters as well. A soldier's note to his sweetheart, filled with promises of return. A merchant's report to his partners, detailing new markets and exotic spices and silks. A traveler's diary, a letter to a family member describing the wonders of a new world, the strange customs, the vibrant colors, the unfamiliar stars in the night sky. Each letter is a vessel of human emotion, a time capsule of hope, love, and longing, making its slow, deliberate journey across the globe. These ships were the arteries of the empire, and the letters they carried were the pulse. They brought news that would make fortunes or ruin them. They carried the seeds of new ideas, philosophies, and discoveries that would slowly disseminate and take root in distant lands. The pace was unhurried, allowing time for reflection, for anticipation, for the news to be absorbed and understood in its full context. There was no instant reaction, no heated, immediate reply. There was only waiting, and in that waiting, there was a kind of peace, a space for thought that we have lost in our modern, instantaneous world. When a ship was spotted on the horizon, it wasn't just a vessel. It was the future arriving. It was tomorrow, finally dawning. The whole community would gather at the port, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. What news would it bring? Would it be a letter from a loved one? A pardon from the king? Or a declaration that changes everything? The breaking of the wax seal was a moment of profound, communal theater. Consider the physical journey of a single letter. It begins on a heavy oak desk in a European capital. After being sealed, it is placed in a leather satchel and carried by a rider on horseback. The horse's hooves clatter on the cobblestones of the city, a sound that fades as it gallops onto the dirt roads of the countryside. The rider travels 4 days, changing horses at posting inns, sleeping in his saddle, his face weathered by wind and sun. He reaches a bustling port city, a cacophony of sounds and smells, and delivers his precious cargo to the ship's captain. The letter is logged and secured below deck. Then begins the long, silent voyage. Weeks turn into months. The ship sails through calm, glassy seas and weathers terrifying storms. The crew scans the horizon, watching for pirates, for land, for any sign that the journey is nearing its end. Finally, the ship arrives in a new continent. The air is different, heavier, scented with tropical flowers and damp earth. The letter is handed off to another messenger, perhaps one who will travel by canoe up a winding jungle river, paddling for weeks through dense, uncharted territory. He might face crocodiles, disease, and the suspicion of local tribes who have never seen a man like him before. His journey continues on foot, through mountains and valleys, until at last he reaches a remote administrative outpost, a tiny speck of imperial authority in a vast, untamed wilderness. He hands the letter, now tattered and travel-stained, to the waiting official. The entire journey has taken the better part of a year. The ink, penned in a distant, cold climate, is now read under a sweltering, tropical sun. The words have crossed the world, carrying the will of a king into a place he will never see, a reality he can barely comprehend. And with the reading of that letter, the slow, ponderous, but relentless machinery of empire completes another turn. It is a process of immense scale and profound patience, a testament to a time when the world was both impossibly large and intimately connected by the simple, powerful act of writing a letter. Now, just let your mind drift with that thought, floating on the slow, steady currents of history. Allow the gentle rhythm of this story to carry you into a state of deep, peaceful rest. Thank you for listening. Follow for more story. In the heart of London, in rooms you could walk past without a second glance, the fate of millions was decided. These were not grand halls of power, filled with shouting politicians or dramatic debates. They were small, quiet, almost monastic spaces, places where the gentle scratch of a pen on paper, the soft rustle of a turning page, and the low hum of a city outside were the only sounds. From these unassuming rooms, a handful of clerks, cartographers, and civil servants administered nearly a quarter of the globe. Imagine a room, perhaps no bigger than your own living room. Sunlight streams through a tall window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The walls are lined with wooden cabinets, their drawers filled with meticulously filed papers. In the center, a large oak table is covered with maps, their surfaces a patchwork of continents and oceans, hand-drawn and colored with incredible precision. This was the nerve center, the brain of an empire. Let's step into one of these spaces. This is the India office, a world within a world on Whitehall. Here, men who had never set foot in Delhi or Calcutta managed the revenues, laws, and armies of the entire Indian subcontinent. Their tools were not swords or cannons, but ledgers, reports, and telegrams. Every decision, from the price of salt in a remote village to the construction of a 1,000-mile railway, passed through these quiet corridors. The clerks here were masters of detail. They knew the monsoon cycles, the regional dialects, the intricate social hierarchies, all from studying dispatches that had traveled for weeks across the sea. They built an empire of information, one file at a time. The air smells of old paper, leather-bound books, and a hint of pipe tobacco. It's a scent of quiet authority, of knowledge meticulously gathered and carefully wielded. Nearby stands the War Office. You might expect it to be a place of urgent energy, of rattling sabers and shouted commands. But here too, the real work was done in serene silence. In the map room, strategists planned campaigns in far-flung deserts and jungles. They moved tiny wooden blocks representing regiments across vast paper landscapes, their decisions rippling outwards to affect soldiers thousands of miles away. These men weren't warriors in the traditional sense. They were intellectuals, geographers, and logicians. They fought wars with ink and paper, calculating supply lines, anticipating enemy movements, and drafting orders that would be carried by steamship and telegraph to the front lines. The silence in these rooms wasn't emptiness. It was concentration. It was the sound of immense responsibility being shouldered with methodical calm. And then there was the Admiralty, the heart of the Royal Navy. From a single legendary room, the Admiralty, boardroom, the world's most powerful navy was controlled. Picture the long, polished table, the high-backed chairs, the portraits of famous admirals staring down from the walls. Here, the lords of the Admiralty would gather. They didn't need to raise their voices. A quiet word, a nod of the head, and fleets would be dispatched to the Caribbean, the South China Sea, or the coast of Africa. Their global network of intelligence was unparalleled. They tracked every significant vessel on the planet. Their charts were the most accurate in the world, updated constantly by survey ships charting unknown coastlines. This room was the ultimate expression of silent power. From this tranquil space in London, they projected British influence across every ocean on Earth, securing trade routes and enforcing a global peace, the Pax Britannica. These rooms were connected by a web of messengers, pneumatic tubes, and telegraph wires. Information flowed in, was processed, and flowed back out as policy and orders. It was a remarkably efficient system, built on routine, discipline, and an unwavering belief in the power of information. The men who worked here were often anonymous figures. They sought no fame or public recognition. Their satisfaction came from the smooth functioning of the great imperial machine they served. They were the architects of a world order, working not with brick and mortar, but with facts, figures, and finely calibrated words. They understood that true control wasn't about noise and fury. It was about knowledge, organization, and quiet, relentless diligence. As daylight fades and the gas lamps are lit, the work continues. The scratching of pens goes on. The maps are consulted under a soft glow. The ledgers are balanced. The city outside grows quiet, but in these small rooms, the world is still being run. The empire was not just built on the courage of its soldiers or the ambition of its explorers. It was sustained in these hushed offices by the tireless, invisible work of clerks and administrators. These were the quiet rooms that ruled the world. And as we close the door on this chapter of history, the silence they leave behind speaks volumes. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the past, consider subscribing for more stories. Sleep well.